can I just let you tell me? All right. Good evening and welcome to the April 8th Board of Aldermen meeting. I now call this meeting to order. I would ask people to rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I would ask the city clerk to call roll.
Alderman Allen. Here. Alderman Hughes. Here. Alderman Kinsella.
Here.
Alderman Murphy.
Here.
Alderman Schwer.
Here.
And Alderman Weezahan.
Here.
I have Alderman Francisco absent. Mary is presiding, and we do have a quorum.
Thank you. Just a quick comment on that. Alderman Francisco wanted to be here, but she had college visits lined up for one of her children and was just unable to change. So she did want to be here. And also, before we go to the minutes, Chief, you have a couple new employees?
Yes, sir.
Would you introduce them?
Certainly. Actually, I had one of my recent corporal promotions with us this evening.
Oh, great. That's,
Regrettably, the other two were both on Eclipse vacation, so
Okay.
they're not in the area. But
That's a
Corporal
deal.
Dustin York, he was promoted along with Corporal Katie Exline and Corporal Alex Fluger last week, and they've already stepped in and they're doing a great job getting us back to where we know we need to be.
Congratulations.
And I also have with us Miss Izzy Simmons in the back, and Miss Katie Sariotti. They're our newest civilian employees. They're helping us in the management of our support services and our operations. So many of the things that you're seeing that are vastly improving on the administrative side of our organization, we'll trace you right back to these two young ladies.
Great, and I'm going to tell you, you're joining a wonderful police force. Really are. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. All right. I seek a motion and second to approve the minutes from our last meeting. Any discussion or amendment? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Has anyone from the public asked to speak?
No, sir, I have no forms at this time.
Thank you. We have no public hearings, so appointments. At this point, I would recognize the board's opportunity to provide highlights from their commissions if they wish. Alderman Murphy.
Yes, Chair, thank you. The Parks and Trails Commission wants to remind the community again of the first of the spring and summer concerts. It'll be featuring Hollywood 5. It'll be held at Town Square on April 19th from 6 till 8 p.m. Food and beverage service will be available from Steampunk, Embrace the Great, Truck Norris, they make gourmet nachos, and Matthews. There's also a Parks and Trails meeting coming up on April 15th at 6:30 at Longview. Thank you.
Thank you. If you haven't been to those concerts, they're well worth it. When the weather's nice, and it usually is, it's a very fine evening. Thank you. Alderman Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to extend my appreciation. On last Thursday, 2 of the West County Fire and EMS officers came to Mason Point and met with 50 or 60 residents, and everyone was so impressed. They asked questions, and the answers were forthcoming, and it was very, very positive experience. And I think the residents appreciate that support from the city.
I'm sure they do, and I'm not surprised they were impressed. Michelle, do you have a report?
No report tonight.
All right. Next, moving on to unfinished business, bill number 24-13, sponsored by the board as a whole, continued from 3/25. Without objection, will the city clerk read the bill for the second time?
The bill before you is the substitute bill, number 2413. That's an ordinance establishing the annual rate of tax levy for the year 2024 on property located within the boundaries of the city of Town and Country, St. Louis County, Missouri, providing for the extension of said taxes on the books of the county collector by the county clerk, and providing for the collection as provided by law.
Thank you. I seek a motion and second.
So moved.
Second. Thank you. I would invite our finance director, Joanne, to dial up to the podium for a presentation.
I have just a few slides.
That's fine.
It's this one. It's this.
There you go.
There we go.
Good work. By all.
It wasn't, it's not, it's all loose.
Yes, good work.
So I want to talk tonight for a few minutes as follow-ups to some questions that have been asked and to provide some more information on certain items. So the first item I want to talk about again is the fund balance reserve policy. And that is codified in chapter 145, section 145, 180.c of the municipal code. And particularly, I wanted to speak about when it was codified, or at least when the update was done and so on and so forth. So in 2013, the reserve limit at that time was raised from 25% to 50% by that ordinance. In that particular document, it says that if it is projected to dip below 50%, no expenditure can be paid without an emergency appropriation approved by 2/3 vote of the Board of Aldermen. And this is concerning because that would significantly stall operations if we need to do that, or would need to do that in the future. The fund balance policy as it was helped us tremendously when we had to deal with the COVID pandemic. And we actually were able to stay slightly above the 50% requirement at that time. In addition to that, it ensures that a minimum of 50% of the projected operating budget can be sustained if revenues fail or fall, fail. And that's important because if we can't keep a certain level with those revenues, and as I've mentioned many times with the fluctuations, particularly with sales tax, that is a bit concerning. And then finally, there would be the potential to reduce the fund balance from 50% to a lower amount. But I would think instead of doing that, you would just want to roll back the amount that you have on the books to a smaller levy than the 23 cents that we're recommending. So with that in mind, I wanted to bring back what I talked with you about previously. This shows the 23% or 23-cent property tax with the $10 million in future facility costs. And the only reason I'm bringing this up is because I want to talk about future facility costs, and Mr. Shelton will provide a lot more detail about those in just a few minutes. But we don't know if it's going to cost exactly $10 million because we haven't actually done the project. And there are various items that you have to look at when you're trying to determine the cost. But we thought, what if, as an example, we only spent $6 million on the project? If you look at that, then I spread it out between 2024 and 2029. You can see the $1 million costs each year for 6 years. And then after that, if you look, all of a sudden, at the 118, 123, and so on. So now we're using much less of our funds because we've completed those large projects. And if the situation is that we don't have any more large projects that we need to complete, this would be a perfect opportunity then to reduce the levy from the higher amount of 23 cents to a much lower amount. It makes sense. However, if in fact it's the flip side of that, and instead of the 6 million or $4 million less, it's $4 million more, and it's $14 million, well then that's a different situation. And so in this circumstance, I put $1.4 million for each year for 10 years. And then you can see that the fund balance drops down, and it's 69% at the end of that 10th year at 2033. However, again, it's above the 50%, and you might consider, if you don't see large expenditures, a slight reduction from the 23 cents. And that's all I have on mine, so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Shelton for his portion.
Can I ask one quick question?
Yes.
Is that your projections of our revenue are projected with there's been discussion about the grocery sales tax, they're projected with the grocery sales tax in place?
So these projections here, yes.
Okay,
I'm just basing them on if the situation happened to be the same.
okay,
Actually, I'm being more conservative. I'm being like, as if this was pre-COVID.
right.
So the revenues are good, the expenditures aren't bad.
Right.
And as you know, especially with the way the economy is right now and the inflation rate, and with expenditures outpacing revenues, I'm certain it's a higher rate this year. So I'm being conservative, and I think that the expenses would be even higher than what I'm showing on these slides.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Joe?
Thank you. I will also add, while Joanne finishes up, she can correct me if I'm wrong, but also in your initial presentation that she made, without any facility expense, with the several different scenarios, the fund balance went below the 50% if you didn't do any property tax, beginning in 2027, one was in 2028. So even if you didn't spend any of this money we're projecting on the capital expenses. But to answer to try to begin to address the facility expense, again, even without these facility expense, you need some type of property tax under all the projections we've done. That to look at some of the facility needs, so some of this was identified by the staff, some of these are already in our 5-year plan, and some of these through our liability coverage risk assessment, they have come in and said there are going to be some things you all need to do with your facilities. And then after I go through some of these items, I'll show you what some of the other areas the cities are spending on their either renovation or new construction. So with the salt dome, I think everybody's fairly aware that we have been budgeting or putting in the 5-year plan to redo the salt dome, build a new salt dome, because our current salt dome, when we store equipment, the equipment rusts because of all the salt. So we have that in there. Michael's got money in beginning the planning. And so in 2028, in the long-range plan, in 5-year, we actually have to build a new salt dome. At that time, moving over to the second column, we recommend renovating that public works building, what's currently the salt storage, so we can store equipment. Frees up some space here in your basement, potentially you expand, allow some room for your police. So, new salt dome, again, no money budgeted, but in your 5-year plan, and the public works, renovating the salt dome for public works storage, redo those restrooms, make it available a little bit of office space, place where the snowplow people can get in out of the cold. We'd estimate those two combined projects are going to be roughly $1 million. Firehouse, in your 5-year plan, or the parking lot, concrete, it's going to need to be replaced. Also in the 5-year plan, already identified there's a leak in the roof, and so in 2025, we have replacing that flat roof. Other items you'll see in there which are either going to be needed either in the future or upcoming, some of your typical capital items, kitchen, restrooms, HVAC, windows, overhauling, all of those areas. Again, big picture, our facilities are going on 40 years old. We want to make them available for another 40 to 50 years. So now we believe it's time to start that planning.
I could make just a quick comment on that. Talking with Chief Sadler and others, I don't think they think, that building was beautiful outside, but they have a strong feeling it's pretty dated inside and it needs some help. And obviously, we have a great relationship with West County Fire. That's a wonderful relationship. I want to be sure we maintain that pretty well.
It's an excellent point. And if I can back up just a second, we are undergoing, the board authorized the budget amount for a planning consultant to look at our needs assessment, consistent with our management partner recommendation. Begin planning, do all your work up front. We had 4 firms who bid on RFQ. We've narrowed it to 2, and we'd now like to begin scheduling interviews with those 2 and eventually bring a recommendation back to the board.
If he's up for it, I think I would ask Alderman Beasley and maybe sit in on some of those interviews if he'd be up for that.
Yeah, sure. I think that'd be an excellent recommendation as chair of police and fire. So moving on, then City Hall, and again, some of these items identified under a risk assessment, liability coverage, some of them by the staff. But this facility will need a new roof. At that time, we're going to figure out what to do with these solar panels that we've taken over. HVAC, the old boiler, we've been working on keeping it alive. And then again, just typical plumbing, HVAC. If we begin to get into renovations, potentially going to have to look at fire suppression, no sprinkler in here, ADA accessibility, environmental remediation, all of those issues that we know some of our neighboring communities have run into. Finally, in the police department, which I've always thought is going to be in the most need for our facility, for our officers, locker rooms, we put some money in just to add a couple lockers into the women's locker room, but those locker rooms need to be expanded, totally renovated, new lockers, new showers, carport structure, Sally Port, which is really just a garage, our gym. We also have a leak in the gym, which is just a minor repair. Our jails will need to be upgraded as well as our evidence storage. And then again, as you see, ADA, accessibility needs, environmental, all those types of things that would come with any type of renovation. If there aren't any questions, we'll go into some comparable cost. So the city of De Pere is right now in the process of renovating their city hall and then a separate building that's their police and fire. Their city hall, the portion that they're renovating is 10,500 square feet. Their cost, $6.3 million. I took out their cost for financing. They're financing a portion of this, and they also put in some things in case they run it over, and I took that out, some contingency money. So this is their big cost that they've begun the work, and then I just figured that into square foot, so they're planning to spend $600 a square foot on their city hall renovation. Their police and fire, again, they're renovating that one building where the police and fire are. I'm estimating it to be 20,000 square feet. They didn't have a size. Their cost, again, without contingencies and financing is 10.6. That comes to $530 a square foot. The last facility I have that was recently renovated was the city of Manchester, bought an old bank, renovated it, building 7,248 square feet. They spent $4 million, comes to $552. They not long ago built a brand new police station over by the Costco. You've probably seen that. So they have a police station, and they don't have any fire responsibilities there in Manchester for the city. So next, under new construction, the city of Baldwin in 2023 built a new police station. That was 26,000 square feet, costing $10.6 million. Square footage, 408. Next one, Ellisville. They're in the process of completing their city hall and police department building. It's 20,860 square feet, 9.5 million square footage comes out to be 455. The next three, Creve Coeur did a police station, and they don't have any fire responsibility. Neither does Baldwin or Ellisville. That's why you don't see any fire facilities. Creve Coeur Police Station in 2019, actual cost was 404. The contractors told me anything before 2020, you ought to increase that by 20%. So I put in 485. Aldermen built a new police, fire, and city hall building, 37,000 square feet. It was 365 with 20%, 438. And then you can see Rock Hill also did police, fire, city hall, 2018, and their cost came to 433. So at the top, renovation average cost, 561. New construction average per square foot, 444. Our city hall and police station is 13,941 square feet. To renovate, obviously, totally estimated, 7.8 million. New construction, 6.2, based on those other expenses. Our fire station, if we were to totally renovate, that 11,300 square feet would come to 6.3 million, and the new construction would be 5. So you can see the total for renovation of both facilities, if that's what you did, 14 million new, both facilities, 11.2. So, questions for me?
Alderman Gonzalez. Thank you, Mr. Sheldon and Mr. Jolly. I definitely have some challenges with the property tax proposal as it sits because, well, first of all, your last points were all about these other municipalities and their needs. And it's difficult to equate those to what Town and Country needs because it's difficult to see how old are their buildings and where are their buildings and how do they service the community needs and so on. So it's hard to use those as easy comparisons with Town and Country. I can appreciate what you've done and the effort you put into it. But as I mentioned to you on the phone, it's just hard to wrap your head around how those are our problem. You know, they're just distant, I guess, in my eyes. I also set aside the grocery tax risk because it isn't enacted. Admittedly, it's being discussed and it's a concern for sure, but it's tough to tell the residents of Town and Country who just throw the property tax at you because they might enact something different. So it's that one to me is something we can set aside for the moment because it's not real yet.
Which again, sorry to interrupt, we have not included that assumption that goes away in any of our projections.
I get it, I get it, but it's part of a list of things
Risk, all
that
potential
are
risk.
part of the argument. So I set those two aside, the comparisons as well as the grocery tax, because they're just difficult to relate. And so as I look at the revenues and the expenses, I can watch the numbers that Mr. Dolly has provided for us, and you can see how we're drifting in the direction of expenses going up, and inflation is certainly going to make that worse. You get that, and that revenue is fairly stable, and that we're not going to have an opportunity for more sales tax revenue any time soon. So those are well-established elements. So to me, it's all going to boil down to the capital improvements. The capital improvements that you described here, the other municipalities have invested in. But the question is then, does Town and Country need to invest in those? Now, we've just sent out, or we're about to send out RFQs, and that will generate some factual information about what we would need to spend and what's out there. But as look at your previous slide that you noted, and as we talked about on the phone, so I was hoping to help prepare for this conversation with you. But the list of things look like they are hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of changes and efforts, roofs and repairs like that can stretch into the 1 million range. But we're talking about these buildings needing $8 to $10 million. In fact, 11 to rebuild them or 14 to renovate them entirely. And that's where I have a tough time. It seems like without the RFQs, we don't have the factual information necessary to set aside the property taxes.
Yeah. And I would just argue in the next 5 to 10 years, your fire station is going to need a major, major renovation. So, and I would also say the same thing about your police department facilities here. City Hall and most of our facilities we've kept maintained, but they're going to need some major, major overhaul. But again, put all the facilities aside, you're still $1 million short in your general fund revenue to pay your police and fire expenses. So I don't know how you cover that 1 million, even if you didn't do this one.
Well, I appreciate that particular arithmetic, but the $1 million that we've included in each of the projections is also the capital improvement. So it makes it substantially worse if you go back and look at all the spreadsheets we just looked at. Each year, we're seeing revenues and expenses off by $1 million, but we're adding another $1 million in each year to make these projections look substantially worse faster. And that's why I have trouble with the capital improvement side of it.
Yeah,
I
but
feel like it's aggressive.
again, yeah, when we looked at the very first presentation, Joanne had 3 different slides, had no capital expense, and you still go below your 50% in 2027. So,
So the purpose of putting the $1 million in the general fund budget was in fact for potential projects in the future. But you could also look at it as a savings account where you're trying to save the money for a future expenditure. Because if you don't save the money, if we as a city don't save the money and we have these capital expenditures in the future, issuing $10 million in debt has some challenges. First, we have to get our voters to approve it. And then the cost of it's about $300,000 more in addition to the $10 million to get the debt, underwriters, et cetera, in order to get that debt.
Joanne, would it be fair to say that over the last couple of years, without putting aside an extra $1 million in the budget for capital expenses, is that we continue to erode our reserves, basically?
That is a challenge, yes. And what we need to do is, I'm not sure also, we're trying to do a better job of doing a more comprehensive 5-year CIP. But the 5-year CIP that we did was trying to make do with the money that we had. But we have 5-year CIP items, or some of these items that we don't have in the 5-year CIP that we currently can't afford to do, but we really need to do them. We need to keep our projects or keep our infrastructure up to date. And these funds would help us do that. And I'm just really concerned also with the inflation, and it's not going to get cheaper to do projects. It's just going to continue to get more expensive.
Alderman Weezan.
Thank you, Mayor. I had one quick question to follow up on Alderman Kinsella's, the point of the $1 million capital expense. Is that assuming that's only going to take place if the property tax is enacted? If in the event we keep it at 0, there wouldn't be $1 million deduction, correct?
there's no $1 million if we don't have a property tax. Does that answer the question?
Right.
Yeah, to spend on facilities.
Yeah.
Even for your salt facility in 2025 that we know we need to do. I don't have that $1 million sitting there to spend.
I guess just to also Alderman Kinsella's point a minute, I think it kind of highlights the need to identify the difference in the operating part of the 23-cent proposal. How much of that is to operate? As we've discussed, we're projecting to run out through our reserves in the next few years, versus the difference of that operating amount of the 23 cents and the savings amount. Is it the 13 and 10 that you're looking at, to where operation wise you're looking at?
That's fair. Yep.
So I agree also with the point that a 50% reserve level is not really, it's what we have for, that if we get to that, we have to start making decisions on a case by case. But, I think in I can't remember the year, but you said that if we had the potential of a $14 million expenses, if we get down to 69% reserves in the future. Is there a number of the reserve that is manageable, that obviously if we can't go below 50 without having to make the two-thirds votes. But what's a manageable number that take the capital expenses out just from the operations that you would recommend keeping the reserves at?
So when I did the survey of various cities, the low end was 40%. And as I had mentioned previously, if after a period of time, we were able to fund the large projects that we needed to fund, and we got to a point where we thought we could manage it with 40%, it's possible. I just would encourage the reduction of the levy as opposed to the fund balance percentage. But I see what you're getting at, and more research can be done. There's a number of things that we can look at. My concern with it is we don't have any opportunity where we're going to have a large growth in revenue anywhere. And if we did, that would help the situation. So for example, if we had a lot more retail here in Town and Country, and we had a large development taking place where we have a lot more retail, that would be an area where I would be then more willing, more interested in the thought process of reducing it to less than 50%.
I guess the question though is, what is our reserve balance today? And we're at 90 or 100%?
Off the top of my head, I'm sorry.
I think, I thought 79% off the top of my head, but 80.
But,
Yeah.
but I mean, we're having a discussion of even the operation part of the property tax is needed. If we're at even if we're at 70%, we're needing a property tax to keep up with the operations. So I don't know how we would get to 40% and only be able to keep the operation part of the tax at 10 to 13 cents. And you said, like today, we're at 79% and we're saying we need a tax. I don't know how we're gonna get to a 40% reserve. Why wouldn't we just take say that we can take the reserves down to 40% today?
Well, the only reason that we're at 79% is because we have the ARPA money and the $1 million in the one-time revenue that added to that fund balance. Without those two, if they would have been put in a different fund, like the capital fund, you would already have a problem. You'd be below 50%, I believe.
And I think, Alderman, to answer your question, we wouldn't want to drop it down to 40% under your current financial situation, being so dependent on sales tax, the volatility of sales tax. That's part of the reason I'm sure that the board in the past decided to bump it from 25 to 50%.
No, I agree. I just, just hearing just wanted to clarify what the need is and where we project. I appreciate putting in the different scenarios coming out. I really appreciate listing. I agree with Alderman Kinsella. It's hard to know what the cost is, but one of my biggest concerns was, this board, everyone here and staff as well, as I mentioned to you, in 2033, most probably won't be here. And I think it's important that if this is where the decision that we're making, it's important that this is the reason that we're doing it, was for, that list of items that need to take place, that we have, a roadmap of what needs to go on. And the last question I was going to ask, can you touch base on, a little bit further the liability risk assessment that was needed?
Yeah, actually, they came in and met with Tom Thousand, and I was not here. I was here for part of the walkthrough, but Tom went with them, and so I don't have a breakout of all the items that they said. These are the items you need to take care of because of the risk, and these are the items, but so I don't know what those are. I apologize. We can put together some of that information. And the last one that's kind of relative to what Joanne was just talking about for future space for sales, and this came up, I think, and we were asked to just identify some of this. The city has no control over any of these properties, but just it was asked, so we will respond. The vacant large tracts of land, covenant seminary property over at 170 or 270 and 40. We have a proposal to turn that into residential. Woods Mill Center is currently more or less vacant, and you have a proposal for residential with some retail proposed there. Tecumseh off of Mason Road, off of Conway, it's zoned residential. Blossom Hill off of Mason, zoned residential. Serendipity off of Topping, zoned residential. All currently used residential, privately owned. Hunter's Farm, south of Ladue, zoned non-urban. It's currently residential, and there would be some possibility if those owners decided in the future to do something, you might be able to get a little bit of retail in there. And then the Principia School has approximately 130 acres, zoned major educational campus, maybe a little potential for a little bit of retail. But as you can see, majority of your vacant properties are residential. And thank you.
What was I going to go? No, everybody left.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Shaw, just a couple things for just
Sure.
clarification now. You're thinking that if I remember the slides from previous meetings correctly, that this 23-cent sales tax is going to be roughly $350 or so per household.
That sounds right.
Roughly, and it obviously depends on the size of the home and the estimated value. And then that would be 3.5% then of their property tax bill. It would be an increase of 3.5% on their property tax bill. Because the property tax bills are roughly $10,000 for the average non-country home. Is that correct?
Sounds right.
Okay, all right. Just wanted to make that. Thank you.
And before I ask for any other discussion or amendment, just would like to throw out a question to the board as a whole, of the 6 members here who are certainly involved in the city's operation and familiar with it. I have to say that I got an amazingly small amount of public input on this issue, and I really thought I would have gotten quite a lot compared to some other issues, but a surprisingly small amount. But in the small amount that I've had, it's kind of like, well, if you just cut the waste, you can fix it. And again, this is not a huge, there's just a few emails like that. I would just like to throw it open to the board here. Do any of you have any evidence that the city does a lot of frivolous spending? Alderman Consol.
Mr. Mayor, I'll comment on that because I certainly appreciate your point. Having only served on the Board of Aldermen now for 1 year, I do have some appreciation for the staff, which is remarkable, really. The fact that we have so few people working in this building and yet being able to accomplish what they do is phenomenal. And it's a pleasure working with this particular group. And so my questions around the property tax really were only about long-term spending and that sort of thing. It certainly.
And my comment wasn't to sort of say for or against the property tax, just kind of wanted.
I appreciate what you're saying, but I just want to make the point that this is a very efficient staff and that should not be lost on anybody.
Right, and I think that reasonable people could view this issue both ways and that's very understandable. Alderman Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, to me, there's just some simple facts. And I appreciate Mr. Sheldon's work on looking at possibilities in areas that we spend or that could be spent if we really are caring about upgrading any facilities existing and or adding any new infrastructure, which that's one of the ongoing concerns that I've heard from residents of infrastructure. We use one-time monies for operating, not for an infrastructure project that would last, but for operating. We continue to have operating costs exceed revenues. We have unstable and actually revenues at risk. Looking through some of my earlier comments, which I don't even want to get to, but you know, we have a few major businesses, and at one point, I think Mr. Spencer commented at our Ways and Means, if we lose one of the significant, one of seven, I think 7 or 8 major facilities, we would be, in a bad place. We'd be up a creek, I'll say it that. And so I think that I believe most residents of Town and Country would be shocked if anyone ever thought they should manage their personal finances with their revenues, their incomes being at risk. We can always say things could happen. Well, something did happen a few years ago with COVID. And a few of us here sat in a room and we went through a lot of projects that had to be delayed, probably at a greater cost than they would have been, and we did survive. And we had the revenues to allow us to survive. But you can only kick those cans down. I've used that term before, I know it, but it still works. We can only do this so far, so many times, and we have done it many times. And, if we do it again, then, there's going to be a point at which the good residents of Town and Country, when they want something done nicer, we may have to say, or whoever is here will have to say, sorry, but we don't have the money. And I don't think a lot of people in Town and Country are used to hearing that. So it comes down to, what do we have in? What goes out? What's a priority? We have great staff. They work very hard and do multiple jobs. And I appreciate just what the chief came up with. We are always looking to do things more efficiently and do things better. And we keep doing them that way. But you can only keep passing on, kicking that can a certain amount of time. And I think this is where we are right now. So this is a turning point, whatever we do tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. I would agree, when you look at the city and the services provided, it's very core. There's not a lot of elaborate services. You have fire, police, certainly the staff that manages all these operations is not elaborate and extravagant. They are working their tails off. No doubt about that. And certainly looking at the data that has been provided, you do see that trend, except for the one-time sales of some property last year. I too was struggling, to be honest, with the idea that at what point, where's that equilibrium point? Where is it 23 cents or is it another number? And I was hoping that we'd have some hard numbers on the repairs and renovations to the firehouse and the city hall. I appreciate you looking at the other data from other cities, kind of extrapolating out, using some numbers on there. Honestly, I was really looking forward to be able to see, like, okay, roughly, and I've gone through the firehouse myself, and I've seen it, and it is in a state of 1973. I mean, it needs modernization. It's uncomfortable for this team that's in there. I get it. I'd still love to see kind of a little more hard data on what those costs would be, what the impact would be, and then rolling it into the charts to kind of see, well, how does that 79% that we have in reserve right now, drop into that a little bit? Do we need to bring it up to 23 cents, or is there another magic number? I'm missing right now some data. Conceptually, I get it, but we're talking real dollars for the citizen.
Alderman Wheelan.
Thank you. I had two things I wanted to touch on. One, I agree that there's really not a lot of waste. Actually, I had a resident stop me today and ask they said, when are certain streets going to get repaired, and why are we doing sidewalks and playgrounds instead of streets? And I explained to them, at the point that yes, there's projects that we do, but a lot of the funding for some of these projects comes from different grants from county for the playgrounds or for federal grants for sidewalks. So I explained that, in addition to the tax revenue, there's a lot of effort that goes into funding these projects elsewhere, which I think is important to remember, that, taking those things into consideration, being able to take care of the different needs in the city outside of our tax revenue, I think is really important. And I did mean to ask earlier, just with that list, can that be added to the minutes for the record?
Yeah, for the record, the presentation that was provided tonight will be added to the minutes section, the document center, on the website with all the other presentations.
Okay.
We'll keep them all together.
All right, thank you.
Alderman Schwer.
Take out the capital expenditure, the capital expenditures, there's other things that taxpayers can get in return, correct? Like returning of branch chipping, leaf removal, extra money on sidewalks. I mean, you're not just budgeting all this extra money just for capital expenditures, right? And the taxpayers can get a little bit more for their.
So we did not include any of those items in here. However, if you did your facility work, finish it, you now have available capital money to do other things if you wanted to do for the residents or reduce that property tax. And the only other thing I would add to Alderman Murphy's point is, you have $1 million in expenses coming up with your public works salt dome and renovation. Or pretty dang close, right, to build that. So there's your 23 cents to get to that $1 million. And if your needs assessment comes in and says, you don't need 6 million or whatever, and you don't want to do other projects, you could roll back your 23 cents at some point.
And before we get to a vote, I just wanted to thank, number one, the members of Ways and Means. They have been looking at this hard with a lot of thoughtfulness, a lot of input. There's nobody on that committee who's shooting from the hip. A lot of investigation, a lot of back and forth. And so I want to thank the members of Ways and Means and thank Alderman Allen for heading that up. And I also want to thank, whatever way this vote goes, I want to thank the members of the board here. Again, they've all been engaged. They've all paid close attention to presentations. There's nobody sleeping through this. There's nobody who hasn't given us a lot of thought. And so I thank the board for their due diligence on it, but I consider it an extremely important topic. And so I'm very grateful for that. Is there any other discussion or amendment proposal? If not, I would ask the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Alderman Allen.
Aye.
Alderman Schwer.
Aye.
Alderman Hughes.
Aye.
Alderman Weezenham.
Aye.
Alderman Murphy.
Aye.
And Alderman Kinsella.
Nay.
It carries 5-1.
Thank you. And again, I think you could look at this from both sides, very logically, and again, I want to appreciate Ways and Means, I want to appreciate everybody on the board here for their due diligence on this very important topic. Thank you.
Mary, I'll also announce for the record that became ordinance number 4621.
Thank you very much. New business, I will read this resolution number R07-2024. A resolution approving a Tai Chi Bubble Tea Restaurant at 1050 Woods Mill Road in the Schnucks Woodville Plaza Shopping Center. I seek a motion and second to approve.
So moved.
Great. Any discussion or amendment? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries unanimously. Congratulations. That's great. That's great.
Thank you.
Good.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, we look forward to it. Thank you. Next, bill number 24-14. Without, I think perhaps sponsoring the Alderman Murphy of the board as a whole without objection, would the city clerk read the bill for the first time?
Bill number 2414 is an ordinance authorizing the city administrator to execute a professional services agreement with Wild Marketing and Media for services associated with event sponsorships, Longview Farmhouse marketing, and acting facility supervisor duties, and amending the 2024 budget by increasing a Parks and Stormwater Fund expenditure account and appropriating funds to cover that increase.
Thank you. Bill number 24-14 is continued to the meeting of Monday, April 22nd, 2024, for the second reading and consideration. The warrant list, lowest I think I've ever seen it, $58,095.21. I seek a motion and second.
So moved.
Any discussion or amendment? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried unanimously. I do not have other business, but we'll open up to the other. Aldermen, they have. If not, I seek a motion and second to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
And I'm assuming no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Thanks. Thank you, really, for all of you.
You're welcome.